Yeah, I think I like the practicality of what you're talking about because I was a few weeks ago, I had a woman who came on the online revival, and she was the CEO of a number of companies, but she was going through a breakup with a business partner, and they've been going at lawsuits against each other for 2 years. And she was really crying out for help on the online revival. And so I told her a parable of a friend of mine whose sister was raped and murdered. And when she went, the man who seemed to be the one who did it was in prison for quite a few years. But when it came up for parole, she was guided to go to the courthouse and to go into this hearing for this man's parole. But when she got to the courthouse, she was in the elevator with the man. And she's been a core student she was for many years. And she just felt this huge love coming out as she gazed at this man who was in handcuffs and being taken up for the hearing. And there was so much, she said, there was so much love that went past between us in the elevator that that when I got into the court hearing and they called me up, she said, I believe he's innocent, and I trust in that, and I believe in forgiveness. And the judge was like, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "I study A Course in Miracles." This was under oath. She went right on to say, "And I believe we're here to see the essence of everyone, not focus on past mistakes and errors." So I told this parable to this woman from Brazil who was going through this 2 years of lawsuit. She wrote back last week. She said, "You're not going to believe it. I went to the courthouse to have a showdown in court over this bit with this business partner. I get in the elevator, and the business partner that she'd been fighting against for 2 years is in the elevator. And I thought of your story, David, and I felt all this love come out, and I smiled at him, and he smiled back at me. And when the elevator door opened, instead of going into the courtroom, we looked at each other and we said, let's resolve this right now." And within minutes, they had cordially agreed to drop everything and came up intuitively with their own solution to a problem that was going on for 2 years. But she said it was striking that it was in an elevator. That you just told me that parable. And when I was in there and faced this seeming man who was she thought was taking trying to take things away from her, the love overcame them both, and it was gone. There it was in one instant. The grievance was gone, and then the lawsuit was dropped in that instant.
The course uses an example of an elevator too.
Yes.
Um, that for when it talks about holy encounters that we just don't know. Uh, it could be when what was the example? Uh, a child bumps into the man, and the
Mhm.
man just smiles in return.
Yes, yes, that's it. It's he's teaching us salvation has come in the most simple, common interactions where there's a smile or a kind word or a kind look in place of a glare or a frown.
I love that responsibility of that. And the responsibility, I'm going to use it at breaking it down. Our ability to respond. That
Yes.
in any moment, I really can just. At first, it might seem like I'm choosing kindness, uh, but what it seems, where it seems to be now, is I'm not choosing kindness. I'm allowing my inherent kindness to be expressed. That the blocks that used to keep me from responding kindly in every situation have diminished to such an extent that all that really wants to come through is that kindness.
That's such a beautiful example that he says miracles are natural. When they do not occur, something has gone wrong. And at one point, he says miracles should be involuntary. They should not be under conscious control. So I think that's teaching us that as long as we think we're doing this course personally, and that we are somehow in charge of miracles. We are not even close to that, what you just described, that gentle leaning back and it just coming through you, the kindness that is naturally you, just naturally extending. That's not like something that you're trying to consciously do. It's more, it's involuntary. And I think Jesus, he talked about that in the Bible where he said, "Don't let the one hand know what the other hand is doing." He was telling us it has to be natural. You can't be going around trying to use your own selection in this.
Right. I think the word that really describes what feels like um, happening with me is I feel like I'm breaking open with tenderness. I just feel this tenderness for everyone and the world, and it's not constant. That's I think that's why I'm using the term breaking out in tenderness. That just it seems to be there as the essence, and it no longer is being held back the way it once was.
Yep. It's like Eric was the caterpillar in the chrysalis, and now the chrysalis is busting open, and those big wings are coming out. And
Exactly.
you're saying, "Oh yeah, I'm going to use them too."
Um, and that's every single one of us.
Yeah, yeah,
We had uh, Lloyd Lapp and Stephanie Finn come up, and he used the as did Reverend Kenneth Price, and he was in here earlier, and they used that butterfly example as well. And as Lloyd pointed out, that Jesus is never addressing the caterpillar, or he's never addressing the caterpillar. He's always addressing the butterfly.
yeah, yeah. That's beautiful because it comes down to free will and starting to realize that our free divine will is one with God's free will, but it takes it away from this idea that free will is confined by choice in any way. And I remember the first time I read the course and I got to the back of the teacher's manual to what was originally the clarification of terms, and he was saying God gives you free will in heaven, but this is a projected world of opposites in which our choices seem to be between the opposites, and Jesus is really teaching us that you're the I am presence prior to these opposites, that you're not going to find free will in a world of opposites, and the best choice you have is for the Holy Spirit, that that the Holy Spirit is the blessing of choose right-mindedness, choose to align with God. And that's what I really focus on. I feel like that's where my mind's attention and energy wants to go, is focusing on the prayer, Holy Spirit, decide for God for me. I like that. It's not David trying to decide something. It's Holy Spirit decide for God, for me, for my mind. And that resonates.
Um, David, it took me 25 plus years to finally read the teacher's manual. Um, I don't know why. For a long time, it felt very presumptuous of me to read a manual for teachers. Who am I to teach the wonderful lessons of a course? Um, and when I finally got to it, I don't know what I waited so long for.
The happy surprise. You
Happy
were in for the
surprise.
happy surprise.
Because we're always teaching, aren't we?
Yeah. We're teaching with our thoughts. So sometimes if we identify with the body, we start to get a false identity as a teacher or a student. But Jesus is clear that teaching goes on all the time and we're teaching with our thoughts. So the real question is, which internal teacher am I going to let come through me, the ego or the Holy Spirit? And that takes it off the behavior of being a teacher in a formal setting or in a formal way. Yeah, it's just not the truth.
Um, so speaking of those teachers, um, and then going towards the ego, could you offer some sort of encouragement to um, our course curious friends who might not have uh, taken that deep dive into the course yet, but they're considering it? Um, and I know a lot of people have some trepidation regarding the ego that I don't know if I want to go to battle with my ego. I don't know if I want to try to eradicate my ego. I don't know if I want to confront it. But the course never ever tells us to do any of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he says you made the ego by believing in it, and you can dispel it by withdrawing your belief from it. That's a lot different than fight the ego. Withdraw your belief from it. So I like to tell people that most of the ego's belief system is unconscious. It's been repressed. And our task is to just every day let it come up. Let it rise. We're not trying to hold it down or block it out. We're just saying it's like that old game we used to play as children, Ghost in the Graveyard. Ollie, Ollie, income free. Okay, ego, uh, you're down there in the unconscious. You're out of my awareness. You're so repressed, but I want you to come into my awareness because I want to see beyond the belief in attack, beyond the belief in defense. I want to be able to look upon these magic thoughts, these false thoughts, and see them with the Holy Spirit and Jesus. And so that, in that sense, he says, forgiveness is quiet and silently does nothing. It looks and waits and watches and judges not. So it's very different from this idea that you have to go to war with the ego, because the ego likes a war. The ego invented it, and it wants the mind to battle and to go into war. But I feel like our peace of mind depends on us being defenseless and being able to be with the Holy Spirit discerning and just watch those thoughts, but not hop on the trains, as they say in the meditation. Yeah, just
Right.
let the trains go by.
I always picture whenever I think of battling the ego, Don Quixote, um, and tilting at imaginary windmills. You can fight and you can fight and you can fight, but you're fighting against something that doesn't really exist.
Yeah, that's it. It's the idea that you can't heal what isn't real. And when we see the problem as a conflict in the world or a sickness in the world or symptom on the body, uh, in all kinds of ways, we're trying to project the problem from the mind into the world, into a situation, a circumstance, an event, a body. And then it gets to be a struggle. If you believe that you're physically sick, then you've already bought the bait, because Jesus says all illness is mental illness, and he's just teaching us, we have to work with your thoughts, because this is where the illness is starting. He calls them fantasy thoughts. We have to really start to loosen your mind from these fantasy thoughts, because the hallucination that these fantasy thoughts are projecting is you can't do anything with it. It's an effect. It's like a movie screen with images, shadow images on it, and don't get upset at the screen and get out of your theater seat and pound on the screen, because it's back in the projector room where the film is, that you have to come back into meditation and prayer and release the thoughts. So those are metaphors have always been really helpful for me.
Um, I'm glad you said effects because basically we're living in a world of effects, and we want to keep rearranging effects for a better world. And however we arrange them, it's still going to be the same effects.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of summarizing that there's really no hierarchy of illusions, that the miracle, there's no order of difficulty in miracles, because there's no hierarchy of illusions. Why? Because they're all unreal effects. Why are they unreal effects? Because they all come from the ego, and the ego isn't a real cause. So to me, this is how I come back to God, where I think God is a real cause. Christ, I mean, the Christ idea, the Christ light is a real effect of the God, the creator. And that's a true cause and effect relationship. And as Jesus said, the Father and I are one. So cause and effect are together. But once we look at the world and we think that there's something causative in the world, even the past causing the present and future, that's erroneous. When we think people can hurt other people at the level of form, that's a projection of false cause and effect. And like you just said, Jesus just wants us to see the world as a series, a sequence of false effects. And the Holy Spirit looks not to effects. That's probably one of the most powerful lines I've ever read in A Course in Miracles. The Holy Spirit looks not to effects, for he has judged their cause as unreal. And if the ego is an unreal cause, it can't produce real effects. It's a trick of mind.
Um, the past year, I've been having imaginary conversations with, or let's say my imagination has been having conversations with me in the form of Kenneth Wapnick telling me that whenever I find myself asking, uh, why is this happening? Uh, what purpose is this? Um, the little imaginary Kenneth Wapnick pops up in my mind and says, because you're concerning yourself with effects, 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 and effects. You want to rearrange the effects. You want a prettier effect. You want a less damaging effect. You want a greater happy effect. But you're always going to get effects.
Yep.
And he always guides me back to the cause.
Oh, it's so sweet. That's like a gentle blessing. Every time you hear that,
It
you
is.
feel that blessing.
My inner imaginary Kenneth Wapnick is also just a little bit of a smartass as well, um, because he always reminds me, you're doing it again. But always kind, always saying,
Yeah,
but always reminding me
yeah,
that
yeah,
however often I return to it, I'll still be dealing with effects.
yeah, yeah. That's very sweet.